Florida versus Georgia, college football pick. This one Saturday. Game will be played on a neutral field. Florida moves to 4-3 after their 45-35 home defeat to LSU Tigers as they hit their bye. Gators pushed across 384 yards, 199 rushing on 34 carries. Defensively, they allowed 4.5 yards per rush, 349 passing yards on 32 carries. Anthony Richardson completed 60% of his passes in the loss, 7.4 yards per attempt. On the year, Richardson 56% completions, 6 touchdowns, 7 picks, 8 yards per pass attempt. Georgia 7-0 after their 55-0 home win to Vanderbilt as they hit the bye. Bulldogs rolled up a season-high 579 yards, 192 rushing on 38 attempts. They stuffed the Commodores' offense for only 150 yards. Stetson Bennett completed 80% in the win, 9.6 yards per pass attempt. This season, Bennett's 71% completion rate with 8.9 yards per attempt. Bulldogs have given up 22 points to both Missouri and Kent. Gators' defense the issue here. Away from their home field, they're allowing 576 yards, 5.4 yards per rush, 12.5 yards per pass attempt. Play here will be Georgia here at minus 22.5. Kentucky versus Tennessee, college football pick Saturday. Kentucky improved to 5-2 after a 27-14 home win to Mississippi State. Wildcats gained 478 yards, 239 rushing on 48 carries. On defense, Kentucky stuffed the Bulldogs' ground attack and limited Mississippi State to just 203 passing yards on 37 attempts. Will Levis, 74% completions in the win, 2 touchdowns, 9.2 yards per attempt. This season, Levis, career highs here, 69.5% completion rate, 10 yards per attempt. Now, Tennessee 7-0 after a 65-24 home win to FCS Tennessee Martin. They produced 696 yards in the win. But that came after their 52-49 home win to Alabama. Hendon Hooker in the Alabama game completed 70% of his passes, 385 yards, 12.8 yards per attempt. Hooker had 5 touchdowns and 1 pick. Season to date, the Virginia Tech transfer, career highs, over 70% completion rate, 10.8 yards per attempt. Hooker has thrown 18 touchdowns, 1 pick. Wildcats defense has traveled, holding teams to just 339 yards, 45% completions, 5.6 yards per attempt. Levis in good form. Play here at Kentucky at plus 12. Michigan State versus Michigan, college football pick. This one's on Saturday. Michigan State 3-4 after their 34-28 home overtime win to Wisconsin. Spartans posted 389 yards in the game with 99 rushing on 39 carries. Defensively, they held the Badgers to only 283 yards, 131 through the air. Peyton Thorne, a season-high 72% completion rate, 2 touchdowns, 9.1 yards per attempt. In conference play, Thorne 66% completions, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks, 6.4 yards per attempt. Michigan improved to 7-0 after their 41-17 home win at Penn State as they hit the bye. Wolverines gained 563 yards with 418 rushing on 55 carries. Defensively, they limited the Nittany Lions to 157 passing yards on 29 attempts, 268 yards for the game here. J.J. McCarthy, 71% completion rate, interception, 6 yards per attempt. This season, McCarthy, 77% completions, 9 yards per attempt. On the road, Michigan State is surrendering 496 yards, 355 passing with 69% completion rate. They do move the football through the air on the road at 272 yards passing away from home. The play will be Michigan and Michigan State over 55. Mississippi versus Texas A&M, college football pick Saturday. Ole Miss fell to 7-1 after their 45-20 road defeat at LSU. Rebels gained 405 yards in defeat, 117 rushing on 37 carries. Now defensively, Ole Miss surrendered over 5 yards per rush, 248 passing yards on 28 attempts. Jackson Dart, 56% completions in defeat with a pick and 8.4 yards per attempt. In the SEC play, Dart 59% completions, 6 touchdowns, 5 picks, 9.4 yards per pass attempt. Texas A&M drops to 3-4 after their 30-24 road defeat at South Carolina. Aggies produced 398 yards with 129 on the ground. That's on 28 carries. Haynes King, season low, 53% completions, 5.6 yards per attempt. This season, King 57% completions, 6 touchdowns, 6 picks, 6.6 yards per attempt. A&M in home FBS game scored 17 against Miami, 14 a loss at Appalachian State. Play here will be Ole Miss minus 1.5. Notre Dame versus Syracuse college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. Notre Dame improved to 4-3. They get the win 44-21 at home to UNLV, but they missed the cover as 26-point favorites. The Fighting Irish gained 430 yards in the game. They ran it for 225 on 47 carries. Defensively, Notre Dame did allow 5 yards a carry with 153 yards in the passing game on 33 attempts. Now, Drew Pine, just 50% completion rate, 7.3 yards per attempt. On the season, Pine about 64% completions, 12 touchdowns, 3 picks, 7.4 yards per attempt. Syracuse fell to 6-1. They lose here, but cover on the road here to Clemson, 27-21, a season low, 291 yards for the Orange, 124 rushing on 28 carries. On defense, the Orange limited the Tigers through the air, but allowed 293 rushing yards on 60 attempts. Garrett Schrader completed 69% of his passes in the loss, only 6.4 yards per attempt. Season to date, Schrader, career highs here, nearly 70% completions, 13 touchdowns, 4 picks, 9 yards per attempt. Wins by margin at home for the Orange against NC State and Louisville. Syracuse defense has performed well at home, allowing just 282 yards, 3.1 yards a carry, 6.1 yards per pass attempt. Fighting Irish not forcing turnovers on defense. Play here will be Syracuse at -3. Ohio State versus Penn State college football pick Saturday. Ohio State, they're 7-0. They get the 54-10 home win to Iowa. The Buckeyes gained 360 yards in that game, rushed for only 66 on 30 carries, but defensively they limited the Hawkeyes on the ground and then allowed just 81 passing yards on 24 attempts. C.J. Stroud, 66% completion rate in the game, in the win, 286 yards passing, 9.4 yards per attempt. He finished with 4 touchdowns and a pick on the season. Stroud, 70% completion rate, 28 touchdowns, 4 picks, 10 yards per attempt. Penn State, they're now 6-1. They get that 45-17 home win to Minnesota. A bounce back off that loss at Michigan. The team posted 479 yards of offense, 175 on the ground on 34 carries. Defensively, the Nittany Lions limited the Golden Gophers' ground attack to under 4 yards per rush and surrendered 175 passing yards on 22 attempts. Sean Clifford's season highs here, 74% completion rate, 295 yards, 9.5 yards per pass attempt. The senior threw for 4 touchdowns and a pick. Now this season, looking at Clifford, 61% completions, 13 touchdowns, 3 picks, 7.7 yards per attempt. Penn State has defended well at home, holding opponents to 302 yards, 3.2 yards per rush, 5.5 yards per pass attempt. They run and pass well at home. The player will be Penn State plus 15.5. Oklahoma versus Iowa State college football pick for Saturday. Oklahoma 4-3, hitting their bye week. They come off the 52-42 home win to Kansas Jayhawks. Sooners, a season high 701 yards, 298 of it on the ground on 57 carries. On defense, they allowed 430 yards to the Jayhawks with 265 passing on 27 carries. Dylan Gabriel missed the Texas game. He returned and produced season highs with 69% completions, 403 yards. He did throw for 9.6 yards per attempt. Now this season, Gabriel, 65% completions, 13 touchdowns, a pick, 2 yards per, with a pretty good yards per pass attempt this season is Gabriel. Now Iowa State, they fell 3-4, a 24-21 road defeat at Texas. The Cyclones, 403 yards of offense, 74 rushing on 28 carries. Cyclones allowed 363 yards to the Longhorns offense, 191 of it rushing on 43 carries. Hunter Decker's 69% completion rate in the win, a season high 329 yards, 9.1 yards per attempt. Decker's on the year 68% completion rate with 7 yards per pass attempt. Now the Hawkeyes have passed for 284 yards or greater in 4 of their previous 5 games. On the road, the Sooners are averaging 467 yards of offense, but their defense is giving up 497 yards. Play here will be Oklahoma and Iowa State over 55. Oklahoma State versus Kansas State college football pick Saturday. Oklahoma State improved to 6-1 after their 41-34 home victory to Texas. Cowboys a season high 535 yards of offense with 142 of it rushing on 40 carries. Defensively, they allowed nearly 7 yards a carry with 319 passing yards on 49 attempts. Spencer Sanders just over 59% completions in the win, 391 yards passing, 6.9 yards per attempt. Against the Big 12 this season, Sanders, 55% completion rate, 5 touchdowns, 3 picks, 6.7 yards per attempt. Now, Kansas State, they're 5-2 after a 38-28 road defeat at TCU. Wildcats produced 390 yards in the game. They ran the football for 158 of it on 30 carries. Defensively, KSU allowed nearly 4 yards per attempt on the ground, 280 passing on 26 attempts. Adrian Martinez exited early with a lower body injury and his game-time decision. His backup, Will Howard, he completed 65% in the game, 11.3 yards per completion. That was his first action of the season. Kansas State passing game struggling the past 3 games, allowing passing defense. Passing defense is struggling over the past 3 games, giving up 279 yards, 65% completion rate, 7.5 yards here per attempt. In this period, the Cowboys are giving up 520 yards with 328 passing. Play here, Oklahoma State and Kansas State over 56. TCU and West Virginia college football pick Saturday. TCU moved to 7-0 after their 38-28 home victory to Kansas State. Horned Frogs moved the football for 498 yards. They rushed for 218 on 53 attempts. Defensively, they did run for over 5 yards a carry and 232 passing on 23 attempts. That's what they allowed in that game. TCU had a +2 turnover margin. Now, Max Duggan completed 65% of his passes in the win, 2 touchdowns and 10.8 yards per pass attempt. Now, looking here at the quarterback here, Duggan, again, 19 touchdowns, 1 pick here on the campaign, so it's been pretty good. West Virginia fell at 3-4 after their 48-10 road defeat at Texas Tech. Season low, 282 yards offensively for the Mountaineers, 73 of it rushing on 26 attempts. Now, defensively, they allowed nearly 5 yards a carry to the Red Raiders, 355 passing on 49 attempts. JT Daniels, 64% completions in the loss, a touchdown, 3 picks, and only 5.4 yards per pass attempt. On the season, Daniels' career low here, 64% completions, 6.6 yards per attempt. It's always tough to play in West Virginia at home in conference play. Mountaineers have a win against Baylor, dropped the game early to Kansas by 7 in overtime. They've amassed an average of 500 yards in each game, in each of those games at home against the Big 12 in high-scoring affairs. On the road, the Horned Frogs are allowing 454 yards, 319 passing. Play here will be West Virginia +7. Wake Forest versus Louisville college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. Wake Forest moved to 6-1 after a 43-15 home win to Boston College. Demon Deacons produced 428 yards in the game here in the win with 115 rushing on 35 carries. Defensively, they limited BC to 2 yards per carry on the ground, 259 passing yards on 45 attempts. Sam Hartman, 62% completions in the win, 7.8 yards per attempt. The signal caller threw for 5 touchdowns and a pick. This season is career highs here for Hartman. 64% completions, 9.1 yards per attempt. Now Louisville, they're 4-3. They come off a 24-20 home win to Pittsburgh. Cardinals offense posted 312 yards. They ran the football for 122 yards, and they rushed it 30 times. They limited the Panthers to under 4 yards a carry with 158 passing yards, and they attempted 29 passes. Malik Cunningham returned and hit a season low here, 47% completions with 5.8 yards per attempt. A running quarterback who rushed for 46 yards on 9 carries. Now on the year, Cunningham, season lows here, career lows I should say, 60% completion rate, 7 yards per attempt. Second game back for Cunningham after his concussion. Now Louisville does move the football for 450 yards at home. They are putting good pressure on the quarterback and hold teams at home to 313 yards. Cardinals defense forcing an average of 3 turnovers a game. Play here will be Louisville +4. Arkansas versus Auburn college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. Arkansas improved to 4-3. They get that 52-35 road win at BYU, a season high. 644 yards of offense, 277 rushing on 42 attempts. They limited their Cougars' run production, did give up 356 passing yards on 41 attempts. Quarterback KJ Jefferson, a season high, 72% completions, 367 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, 9.2 yards per attempt. This season, Jefferson about 68% completion rate, 9.1 yards per attempt. He has rushed for 4 touchdowns. Now Auburn, they fell to 3-4 after a 48-34 road defeat at Ole Miss as they hit the bye. Tigers posted 441 yards of offense, 301 rushing on 48 attempts. Defensively, they allowed over 7.5 yards a carry on the ground with 130 passing yardage on 19 attempts. Robbie Ashford starting here as a starter, a season low 47% completion rate with 2 interceptions, 8.2 yards per attempt. On the year, Ashford just 48% completion rate, 4 touchdowns, 5 picks, 7.2 yards per attempt. The Razorbacks have been weak defensively, especially in the secondary. They're allowing 519 yards per game on the road. The play here will be Arkansas and Auburn over 61. Baylor versus Texas Tech, college football pick Saturday. Baylor, they're now 4-3 after their 35-23 home win at Kansas. Bears gained 437 yards with 237 rushing on 57 carries. Defensively, Baylor held the Jayhawks to 56 rushing yards with 232 passing on 27 attempts. Blake Shapen, 65% completions, 6.3 yards per attempt. He had a touchdown and 2 interceptions. Now this season, Shapen, 68% completion rate, 8.6 yards per attempt. Now Texas Tech 4-3 after their 48-10 home win to West Virginia. Red Raiders, a Big 12 season high, 594 yards, 239 rushing on 54 carries. They held the Mountaineers to under 3 yards per rush and 209 passing yards on 40 attempts. Tyler Shaw has missed the past 6 games due to a shoulder injury. Baylor on the road giving up 283 yards passing with 7.5 yards per attempt. Defense not as strong as last season. They are moving the football through the air. The play will be Baylor and Texas Tech over 62.5. Cincinnati versus UCF, college football pick Saturday. Cincinnati moves to 6-1 with their 29-27 road win at SMU. Bearcats offense produced 379 yards, 179 rushing on 42 carries. Defensively, they led both the pass and running game for the Mustangs with 259 overall yards. Ben Bryant season lows here, 51% completion rate, 5.7 yards per attempt. Now in AAC play, Bryant is completing 58% of his passes, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks, and 6.6 yards per attempt. Now UCF, they fell to 5-2 with a 34-13 road defeat at East Carolina. Nice offense, put up 426 yards, 130 of it rushing on 32 carries. They did allow nearly 5 yards per rush to the Pirates and 311 passing yards on 36 attempts. John Plumlee, 67% completion rate in the loss, 296 yards. He averaged 8 yards per pass attempt but threw 3 picks. Plumlee against the AAC this season is completing 71% of his passes, 11.2 yards per attempt. The Bearcats defense has been good against this season, holding teams to 330 yards. Would expect Gus Malzahn here to avoid mistakes in the passing game and play in this one a little bit more conservative with more ground attack and field position. Bearcats, a really highly penalized team. The play here will be Cincinnati and UCF under the total of 56. Georgia Tech and Florida State college football pick Saturday. Georgia Tech, they fell to 3-4, a 16-9 home defeat to Virginia. A season low here, 202 yards offensively, 56 rushing on 37 carries. On defense, the Yellow Jackets allowed 4 yards to carry on the ground with 255 passing yards on 35 attempts. Zach Gibson, just 40% completions in defeat with 4 yards per attempt. The Akron transfer last year had a 69% completion rate with 8 yards per attempt. Now, Florida State 4-3 after their 34-28 home defeat to Clemson as they hit the bye week. Seminoles did move the football for 460 yards, 206 of it rushing on 34 carries. Defensively, they limited the ground attack of Clemson and gave up 203 passing yards on 23 attempts. Jordan Travis hit on 57% of his passes in the loss, 2 touchdowns, 6 yards per pass attempt. This year, Travis, 62% completion rate, 8.4 yards per attempt. Now, Georgia Tech struggling to get points on the board. Quarterback situation not good for the Yellow Jackets. At home, Florida State holding teams at 293 yards. The play here will be Georgia Tech and Florida State to go under 48. Illinois versus Nebraska college football pick. This one goes off on Saturday. Illinois 6-1 after their 26-14 home win to Minnesota. Final Illini, a Big Ten season high of 472 yards. They ran it for 220 yards on 54 carries. On defense, Illinois allowed 5 yards per rush, but only 38 passing yards on 18 attempts. Tommy DeVito, season high, 78% completions, 252 yards, 7.9 yards per attempt. DeVito on the year, career high, 70% completions, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks, 7.2 yards per attempt. Nebraska fell to 3-4 after their 43-37 road defeat at Purdue. Cornhuskers posted 476 yards, 122 on the ground on 23 rushes. Defensively, Nebraska allowed over 4 yards per carry on the ground, 391 yards passing on 54 attempts. Casey Thompson and Carrillo, 55% completion rate in the loss, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, and a season high 12.2 yards per attempt. On the year, Thompson is completing 64% of his passes with 8.9 yards per attempt. Here on that one, Final Illini on the road holding teams at 285 yards a game. They have a 34-10 road win at Wisconsin, and they carry a 5-game win streak. The play here will be Illinois here at -7. Miami versus Virginia college football pick Saturday. Miami dropped to 3-4 after their 45-21 home defeat to Duke. Hurricanes offense posted 327 yards with just 48 rushing on 31 carries. Defensively, they limited the Blue Devils' passing attack but gave up 200 rushing yards on 42 carries. But it was 8 turnovers for Miami. Tyler Van Dyke, an upper body injury that forced his exit from the game. Van Dyke on the season, 64% completion, 7.3 yards per attempt. Now, backup Jake Garcia completed 62% in the loss, 9.4 yards per attempt. But Garcia threw 3 interceptions and lost 2 fumbles. Season to date, Garcia, 66% completions, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 9.8 yards per attempt. Now, Virginia at 3-4. They come off the 16-9 road win at Georgia Tech. Cavaliers in ACC conference high, 411 yards, 156 of it rushing on 38 attempts. Strong defensive performance by Virginia, holding Georgia Tech to just 202 yards, limiting both the run and pass. Brennan Armstrong, 57% completions in the win, 7.3 yards per attempt. He had a touchdown and 2 picks. Now against the conference, Brennan, 57% completion rate, 4 touchdowns, 6 picks, 6.3 yards per attempt. Cavaliers offense produced only 17 points per game and a turnover-prone offense that's allowing nearly 3 turnovers a game. Offensive talent better for the Hurricanes. Play here will be Miami here at -2. SMU versus Tulsa college football pick for Saturday. SMU enters at 3-4 with their 29-27 home defeat to Cincinnati. Mustangs, a season low, 259 yards of offense, 80 on the ground on 31 carries. Defensively, they did allow 4.5 yards a carry on the ground, 200 passing yards on 35 attempts. Tanner Mordecai completed 60% in the loss with a season low of 4.2 yards per attempt. He left with an injury and relieved by Preston Stone, a freshman who completed 40%, a touchdown, and 4.9 yards per attempt. In limited action this season, Stone, 55% completions, 5.5 yards per attempt. Now, Tulsa, their 3-4 team, after a 27-16 road win at Temple, Golden Hurricane produced 454 yards. They rushed for 299 on 46 carries. They limited the Owls on the ground and gave up 196 passing yards on 48 attempts. Golden Hurricane failed to cover, really was due to 3 turnovers. Davis Brin, 68% completions in the win, 7 yards per attempt, but he threw for 2 interceptions and one going for a touchdown. Owls, and that was for the Owls. On the year, Brin, 61% completion rate, 9 yards per attempt. On the road, the Mustangs are allowing 454 yards, 5 yards per rush. Golden Hurricane passing game, producing 342 yards at home with 9.3 yards per attempt. Mordecai injury, the concern for SMU. Play here will be Tulsa +2.5. Stanford versus UCLA college football pick Saturday. Stanford, they're now 3-4 after their 15-14 home win to Arizona State. Cardinal moved the football for 398 yards, 78 of it rushing on 25 carries. Defensively, they allowed 4 yards per rush to ASU with 227 yards passing on 26 attempts. Tanner McKee, he completed 58% in the win, 320 yards, but only 5.6 yards per attempt. Season to date, McKee, 63% completions, 7.5 yards per attempt. UCLA, they're now 6-1 after their 45-30 road defeat at Oregon. In that game, the Bruins posted 448 yards, 186 on the ground on 30 carries. Defensively, the Bruins gave up over 6 yards a carry on the ground to the Ducks, along with 262 passing yards on 28 carries. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, 69% completions, in a season low 6.7 yards per attempt. On the year, Thompson Robinson, career highs here, 74% completion rate, 8.8 yards per attempt. At home, the Bruins are averaging 504 yards a game and putting up 41 points. Cardinal running for only 2.7 yards per rush on the road and surrendering 6.5 yards to carry on the ground to opponents. Play here, UCLA minus a 16.5. USC and Arizona college football pick. This one goes off on Saturday. USC hits their bye week at 6-1 after their 43-42 road defeat at Utah. Trojans a season high 556 yards, 175 rushing on 27 carries. Defensively, they allowed only 4 yards a carry on the ground and 424 yards passing on 45 attempts. Caleb Williams, 59% completions, 5 touchdowns, 9.1 yards per attempt. On the season, Williams, 64% completion rate, 19 touchdowns a pick, 8.6 yards per attempt. Arizona, they fell to 3-4, a 49-39 road defeat at Washington. Wildcats posted 526 yards offensively, 126 rushing on 33 carries. Arizona limited the Huskies' ground attack but allowed 516 passing yards on 44 attempts. Jane DeLaura, a season high here, 73% completions, 4 touchdowns, 11.8 yards per attempt. In Pac-12 play, DeLaura, 65% completions, 13 touchdowns, 3 picks, 9.1 yards per attempt. Arizona against the Pac-12 are allowing 532 yards and 42 points a game, while they're gaining 523 yards and scoring 34. Last year, these teams combined for 75 points, and each offense improved this season. Play here, USC and Arizona over 76.5. USF versus Houston college football pick. This one Saturday. South Florida, they're 1-6 after their 45-31 home defeat to Tulane. They gained 377 yards in the game with 118 rushing on 28 carries. Defensively, the Bulls did surrender 554 yards to the Green Wave, nearly 5 yards to carry on the ground, and 329 yards passing on 36 attempts. Gary Bohannon, while he injured his shoulder, he's out for the year. Travis Marsh in mop-up duty this season, 42% completion rate, 2 touchdowns, 7.6 yards per attempt. That was in the game that he filled in for Bohannon. Now, overall here this season, Marsh, 45% completions, in 2020, 48% in 2021. Houston, they're now 4-3, 38-20 road win at Navy. Cougars moved the football for 441 yards. They ran it for 180 on 34 carries and limited the midshipmen to 4 yards a carry on the ground, 125 passing yards on 13 attempts. Many of that came on a long pass near the end of the game when it was decided. Clayton Tune completed 70% of his passes in the win. Season high, 5 touchdowns, 8.7 yards per attempt. On the season, Tune here, 65% completions. He has 17 touchdowns, 4 picks, 7.4 yards per attempt. On the road now, USF has given up 6.6 yards per rush and a really high 12.5 yards per completed pass. Really a strong edge in quarterback position for Houston here. The play here will be Houston minus 17.5. Arizona State versus Colorado college football pick Saturday. ASU moved to 2-5 after their 15-14 road defeat at Stanford. Sun Devils gained 355 yards in that one, 128 rushing on 34 carries. Defensively, they limited the Cardinals to 3 yards per rush and allowed 320 passing yards on 58 attempts. Florida transfer Emory Jones, 56% completion rate with 9.1 yards per attempt. Pac-12 play here, Jones, 64% completions, 3 touchdowns, 4 picks, 7.7 yards per attempt. Colorado 1-6 after that 42-9 road defeat at Oregon State. Buffalo's gained 290 yards in that one, 84 rushing on 28 attempts. Defensively, Colorado is giving up over 6 yards per carry, 202 yards passing on 22 attempts. Starting quarterback Owen McCown has been limited in practice and a game-time decision. Their top 2 running backs out. Backup JT Stroud completed 45% with 2 picks and 7.1 yards per attempt in his time there this season. The play here this season, by the way, Stroud 45% completions, 5.3 yards per attempt. Buffs have allowed 41 or greater points in 5 of 6. Sun Devils on the road giving up 449 yards or 312 yards passing on 7 yards per attempt. Play here will be Arizona State and Colorado over 46.5. Boston College and UConn college football pick for Saturday. Boston College 2-5 after their 43-15 road defeat at Wake Forest. Eagles offense gained 315 yards on with 56 rushing on 23 carries. Defensively, they limited the Demon Deacons on the ground, but gave up 313 passing yards on 40 carries. Notre Dame transfer quarterback Phil Jurkovec, 52% completion rate in the loss with a touchdown and 5.8 yards per attempt. This season, Jurkovec 59% completions with 6.8 yards per attempt. Now, UConn, they fell to 3-5 after their 25-21 road defeat at Ball State. The Huskies gained 312 yards, 194 of it on the ground on 42 carries. On defense, they held the Cardinals' passing attack to 147 yards, but surrendered just under 5 yards a carry on the ground. Zion Turner, 82% completions on the game, 2 touchdowns, a pick, and 5.9 yards per attempt. On the year, the freshman, 61% completion rate, 5.1 yards per attempt. Huskies have shown improved to their defense. BC offense rushing for only 2.3 yards a carry this year. They're averaging 308 yards per game. Player will be Boston College and Connecticut to go under 45.5. Charlotte versus Rice, college football pick Saturday. Charlotte drops to 1-7 after a 34-15 home defeat to FIU. 49ers offense posted only 337 yards, 60 of it rushing on 28 carries. On defense, Charlotte limited the Golden Panthers' ground attack, but allowed 306 passing yards on 34 attempts. Chris Reynolds, 60% completion rate in the loss, 3 interceptions, and a Conference USA low 6.4 yards per attempt. This season, Reynolds, 63% completion rate. He's got 8.1 yards per attempt. Now, Rice improved to 4-3. They get the win 42-41 on the road here to Louisiana Tech. The Owls in the FBS high, 487 yards of offense in the game. 279 rushing here on 45 carries. They held the Bulldogs' run game to under 4 yards a carry with 229 passing yards on 37 attempts. Owls survived a -2 turnover margin. TJ McMahon completed 59% of his passes in the win, 3 touchdowns, 7.7 yards per attempt. This season, McMahon 59% completions, 7.8 yards per attempt. Charlotte defense on the road giving up 535 yards, 5.3 yards per rush, 10 yards per pass attempt. Owls defense holding teams at home to just 288 yards. To play, he'll be Rice here at -16.5. Coastal Carolina and Marshall, college football pick Saturday. Coastal Carolina fell to 6-1 after their 49-21 home defeat to Old Dominion. Chanticleers produced 454 yards, but 88 on the ground on 42 attempts. Defensively, Coastal Carolina gave up 525 yards with 324 rushing on 31 carries. Now, Grayson McCall, season high 76% completion rate, 358 yards, 3 touchdowns, 10.5 yards per attempt. On the season, McCall, a 70% completion rate, 18 touchdowns, a pick, 10 yards per attempt. Now, Marshall, 4-3. They get a 26-12 road win at James Madison. Thurman Hurd, 326 yards of offense with 4 yards per rush. They limited the Duke's ground game, allowed only 164 yards passing on 35 attempts. Freshman Cam Launcher completed 48%, a touchdown, 2 picks, 5.1 yards per attempt. Now, Columbia was scratched after warm-ups with an injury last week. Season 8, the Texas Tech transfer, 73% completion rate, 7.4 yards per attempt. Marshall quarterback situation concerning. Chanticleers, McCall, another great season play here. Coastal Carolina +2.5. Colorado State and Boise State college football pick. This one goes off on Saturday. Colorado State improved to 2-5 after their 17-13 home win to Hawaii. Rams, a season high, 386 yards, 209 rushing on 40 carries. On defense, CSU limited the Warriors' ground attack to under 4 yards per rush and 173 passing yards on 30 attempts. Clay Millen completed 71% in the win, 7.4 yards per attempt. Season 8, the freshman, 73% completions, 7.3 yards per attempt. Boise State improves to 5-2 after their 19-14 road win at Air Force. Broncos gained only 322 yards in victory, 115 of them rushing on 40 carries. Defensively, they limited the Air Force ground attack to 3.5 yards a carry and 96 passing yards on 9 attempts. Taylon Green, 67% completions, season high, 8.6 yards per attempt, but 1 pick. Now, Green is a running style quarterback on the season. Green, 62% completions, 2 touchdowns, 4 picks, 6.7 yards per attempt. Respected offensive performance by Colorado State in their 4-point home loss to Utah State. The play here will be Colorado State at +27.5. Miami, Ohio versus Akron college football pick Saturday. Miami, Ohio 3-5 after their 16-10 home defeat to Western Michigan. Redhawks gained only 305 yards in the game, 83 rushing on 28 carries. They limited the Broncos' passing game, allowed 181 rushing yards on 45 carries. Avion Smith, 53% completions with the touchdowns, 5.4 yards per attempt in the loss. Season to date, Smith, 52% completion rate, 6 yards per pass attempt. Akron, 1-7, a 33-27 road defeat at Kent. Zips a season high, 492 yards offensively, 109 rushing on 43 carries. Defensively, Akron struggled defending the run, allowing 242 yards on 39 carries. DJ Irons, 74% completion rate in the loss with 383 passing yards, 8.9 yards per attempt. Irons had a touchdown and 2 picks in his MAC play this year. Irons, 71% completions, 7.6 yards per attempt. Red Hawks have struggled to put up points. Zips have covered 4 of 5 behind DJ Irons, who has improved this offense, no doubt. Play here will be Akron plus the 9. Middle Tennessee State versus UTEP college football pick Saturday. Middle Tennessee State 3-4 after their 35-17 home defeat to Western Kentucky. Blue Raiders offense produced only 291 yards. They ran it for 63 on 26 carries. On defense, the Blue Raiders allowed 4.5 yards per rush, 278 passing yards on 40 attempts. Chase Cunningham, 63% completion rate in defeat, 4.5 yards per attempt. On the year, Cunningham career high, 66% completions, 6.6 yards per attempt. UTEP, they're now 4-4 after their 24-21 home win to FAU. Miners offense gained 412 yards with 234 rushing on 41 carries. On defense, they allowed 4 yards per rush to the Owls with 164 passing on 20 attempts. Gavin Hardison, 61% completions in that victory, 6.8 yards per attempt. This season, Hardison, 52% completion rate, 6.7 yards per attempt. Blue Raiders have lost 3 straight, all in Conference USA. In this period, Middle Tennessee State gave up 282 passing yards with 8 yards per attempt. Blue Raiders run game struggling. The Miners have defended the pass well. Play here will be UTEP at -2.5. Missouri versus South Carolina college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. Missouri improved to 3-4 after their 17-14 home win to Vanderbilt. Tigers gained 308 yards with 97 rushing on 40 attempts in the win. They limited the Commodores on the ground with 2 yards per rush and surrendered 242 passing yards on 45 attempts. Brady Cook, 68% completions in the win, 211 yards, 8.4 yards per attempt on the season, a completion rate of 65%, 6 touchdowns, 7 picks, 7.3 yards per attempt. South Carolina improved to 5-2, a 30-24 home win at Texas A&M. Gamecocks win despite season low here, 286 yards, 118 rushing on 35 carries. South Carolina limited the Aggies on the ground and allowed 269 passing yards on 47 attempts. Spencer Rattler, season low here, 48% completions, 6.7 yards per attempt. Tigers' point production is the issue here. Recent quality wins by the Gamecocks at Texas A&M and on the road to Kentucky. Player will be South Carolina at -3.5. Nevada versus San Jose State college football pick Saturday. Nevada, they fell to 2-6 after their 23-7 home defeat to San Diego State. Rebuilding Wolfpack gained 227 yards with 35 rushing on 21 carries. On defense, they allowed 4 yards per carry with 156 passing on 25 attempts. Nate Cox just 25% completions with a season low 1.4 yards per attempt. Shane Illingworth, relieved, completed 63% of his passes, 5.5 yards per attempt. The Oklahoma State transfer, a 61% completion rate, 4.8 yards per attempt. San Jose State is 4-2 after their 17-10 road defeat at Fresno State as they hit the bye. Spartans posted 331 yards with 37 rushing on 23 carries. Defensively, they held the Bulldogs to 3 yards a carry and 230 passing yards on 32 attempts. Hawaii transfer Chevin Cordero, a season low 49% completions with 302 yards and 6.7 yards per attempt. On the year, Cordero, 56% completion, 7 touchdowns, 1 pick, 7.8 yards per attempt for the Hawaii transfer. Both defenses playing well the past 3 games. Nevada in this period just allowing 287 yards with 2.7 yards per rush. Is their offense right now, not moving the football. That 287 yards was their past 3 games offensively. The play will be Nevada and San Jose State to go under 44.5. New Mexico State versus UMass college football pick for Saturday. New Mexico State moved to 2-5 after their 21-9 home win to rival New Mexico. Aggies gained only 225 yards, 106 rushing on 31 carries. Defensively, New Mexico State held the Lobos to only 269 yards. Diego Pavia completed 57% of his passes, 6.1 yards per attempt, 85 yards passing. On the season, Pavia 40% completions, 4 picks, 4.1 yards per attempt. Only at New Mexico State can you start with those numbers. Now UMass fell to 1-6, hitting the bye week with their 34-7 home defeat to Buffalo. Minutemen gained 220 yards in defeat, 112 rushing on 41 carries. On defense, UMass allowed over 5 yards per rush to the Bulls, 277 yards passing on 31 attempts. Garrett Zoro completed 50% of his passes, 99 yards, 7.1 yards per attempt. On the season, a 57% completion rate, 8.7 yards per attempt. Now, these are two run-heavy teams with really poor quarterback play, each team completing mid-40% of their passes. Play here will be New Mexico State, UMass under 39. North Texas versus Western Kentucky college football pick Saturday. North Texas drops to 4-4 after their 31-27 road defeat at UTSA. Mean Green gained 347 yards, but only 22 on the ground on 22 carries. On defense, North Texas was crushed on the ground, giving up 257 rushing yards on 54 carries. Austin Ani completed only 48% in the loss, 10.5 yards per pass attempt. Ani threw for 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. On the season, Ani 55% completion rate, 20 touchdowns, 9 picks, 8.9 yards per attempt. Now Western Kentucky improved to 5-3 after their 20-17 home win to UAB. Hilltoppers a season low, 352 yards, 224 on the ground on 44 carries. WKU defensively limited the Blazers' passing game, but did give up 228 yards rushing on 39 carries. Austin Reed, 61% completions in the win, with a season low 5.6 yards per attempt. On the year, Reed, 70% completions, 21 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 7.6 yards per attempt. Back-to-back road games for the Mean Green. Mean Green has covered 3 of 4 on the road. Past 3 games, Mean Green averaging 500 yards of offense. Play here will be North Texas plus 10. Northwestern versus Iowa college football pick Saturday. Northwestern falls to 1-6 after their 31-24 road defeat at Maryland. The Wildcats offense gained 358 yards. They ran it for 215 yards on 46 carries. Defensively, they surrendered 5.1 yards per rush and limited the Terrapins' passing game. Brendan Sullivan, 75% completions, 6 yards per attempt. Sullivan threw a touchdown but had 2 picks. In his 2 starts, Sullivan completing 71%, 6.3 yards per attempt. Now Iowa, they fall to 3-4 after their 54-10 road defeat at Ohio State. Hawkeyes a season low 158 yards, 77 rushing on 35 carries. They did limit the Buckeyes' ground attack to just over 2 yards a carry, but surrendered 294 passing yards on 32 attempts. Hawkeyes committed 6 turnovers. Now Spencer Petras, season lows here, 43% completions, 49 yards passing, 2 interceptions, 3.5 yards per attempt. Season to date against the Big Ten, Petras, 57% completions, a touchdown, 3 picks, 6.3 yards per attempt. Iowa's averaging only 227 yards a game. Wildcats have covered 11 of 13 against bad offensive teams that average less than 310 yards per game. Play here Northwestern at plus 11.5. Old Dominion and Georgia State college football pick. This one goes off Saturday. Old Dominion fell to 3-4 after their 28-23 home defeat to Georgia Southern. Monarchs gained 461 offensive yards, 133 of them rushing on 22 carries. Defensively, they surrendered over 4 yards to carry with 192 passing yards on 27 attempts. Hayden Wolf completed 57% of his passes, 328 yards, 8.2 yards per attempt. Wolf on the year down from the previous 2 seasons, 58% completions, 12 touchdowns, 2 picks, 7.5 yards per attempt. Georgia State 2-5 after their 42-17 road defeat at Appalachian State. Team produced a season low 301 yards, 228 rushing on 41 carries. Defensively, they limited the Mountaineers' passing attack but surrendered 404 yards rushing on 64 carries. Panthers committed 4 turnovers. Quarterback Darren Granger just 39% completion rate, 3.2 yards per attempt, and a pick. Granger a career low 53% completions, 7.5 yards per attempt. Panthers' home loss to Charlotte, the major concern here. They did get up against their rivals Georgia Southern at home, but lost their three other home games. Old Dominion, good run defense and the better passing attack play here. Old Dominion plus 3.5. Oregon versus California college football pick for Saturday. Oregon improved to 6-1 after their 45-30 home win to UCLA. Ducks, they gained 545 yards in that one with 262 rushing on 46 carries. Defensively, Oregon allowed over 6 yards per rush to the Bruins with 282 passing on 39 attempts. Bo Nix, he completed 78% in the win with 5 touchdowns and 10.1 yards per attempt. Now in Pac-12 play, Nix 72% completions, 10 touchdowns, 1 pick, 9 yards per pass attempt. California sits at 3-4 after their 28-21 home defeat to Washington. Golden Bears gained 306 yards in that one with 61 on the ground on 31 carries. Defensively, the Golden Bears limited the Huskies' ground attack but allowed 374 yards passing on 51 attempts. Jack Plummer, 62% completions and lost 3 touchdowns, 7.2 yards per attempt. In Pac-12 action, Plummer, 62% completions, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception, 7 yards per attempt. Ducks in their 2 Pac-12 road games have averaged 46 points and 547 yards a game. They're allowing 31 points a game on the road in conference play here. Oregon, California over 58.5. Pittsburgh versus North Carolina college football pick Saturday. Pittsburgh drops to 4-2 after their 24-10 road defeat to Louisville. Panthers gained 326 yards with 168 rushing on 37 carries. On defense, they held the Cardinals to 4 yards per rush and 190 passing on 27 attempts. Keaton Slovis, 55% completions in the loss, 2 interceptions, 5.4 yards per attempt. On the season, the USC transfer Carrillo, 60% completions, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 7.5 yards per attempt. North Carolina 6-1 after their 38-35 road win at Duke, hitting the bye week. Tar Heels offense gained 536 yards rushing, 536 yards. They rushed for 156 on 35 carries. Defensively, they surrendered 7.5 yards a carry, 245 passing yards with 31 attempts. Drake May completed 74% of his passes in the win, 380 yards, 3 touchdowns, 10 yards per attempt. In ACC play, May 71% completion rate with 10.2 yards per attempt. You know, May in the better form between these two quarterbacks. Play here will be North Carolina -3. San Diego State versus Fresno State college football pick Saturday. San Diego State improves to 4-3 after their 23-7 road win at Nevada. Aztecs gained 317 yards with 161 rushing on 39 carries. Defensively, the Aztecs held the Wolfpack to under 2 yards per rush with 192 passing on 41 carries. Jalen Maiden completed 48% of his passes with 6.2 yards per attempt. In his 2 games, Maiden 59% completion rate, a touchdown, and 7.8 yards per attempt. Fresno State, they sit at 3-4 after their 41-9 road win at New Mexico. Bulldogs in FBS season high at 510 yards with 285 rushing on 50 carries. On defense, they limited the Lobos to just over 3 yards per carry with 51 passing yards on 17 attempts. Jake Haener is week to week with a leg injury. Backup Logan 5, 65% completions in the win, 7.8 yards per attempt. On the year, 68% completion rate, 2 touchdowns, 6 picks, 7.4 yards per attempt. Aztecs have defended the pass well this year. On offense, they are producing 4.7 yards per rush to play here. San Diego State here at +9. South Alabama versus Arkansas State college football pick Saturday. South Alabama moves to 5-2 with their 10-6 home defeat to Detroit. Jaguars a season low 246 yards with 31 rushing on 21 carries. Defensively, they limited the Trojans' run game to 3 yards a carry and surrendered 138 passing yards on 19 attempts. Carter Bradley, 72% completion rate with a season low 5.4 yards per pass and an interception. On the year, Bradley career high here, 65% completions, 13 touchdowns, 5 picks, 8 yards per attempt. Arkansas State sits at 2-6 after their 38-18 road defeat at Louisiana. Red Wolves posted only 271 yards in the game, 82 of it on the ground on 21 carries. Team surrendered 4 yards a carry, rushing for 316 yards on 37 attempts. Now, James Blackman, 73% completions, 2 touchdowns, 6.9 yards per attempt. This season, Blackman, 69% completions, 11 touchdowns, 1 pick, 7.9 yards per attempt. At home, Arkansas State put up 398 yards, 245 passing, 72% completions. Jaguars have failed to cover 3 straight. Play here will be on Arkansas State at +10. Temple versus Navy college football pick. This one is on Saturday. Temple fell to 2-5 after their 27-16 home defeat to the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. Owls posted just 280 yards of offense, 64 of it rushing on 26 carries. Defensively, well, they contained the passing attack at Temple in that one, and Golden Hurricane, but they gave up 299 yards rushing on 46 carries, over 6 yards per attempt. E.J. Warner is season low here, 48% completions, 4.1 yards per attempt in the defeat. In AAC play, Warner 51% completion rate, 2 touchdowns, 4 picks, 5.3 yards per attempt. Navy fell to 2-5 with their 38-20 home defeat to Houston. Midshipmen gained 326 yards in the loss, 201 rushing on 50 carries. Navy did allow 5 yards to carry to the Cougar running game with 261 passing on 30 attempts. Ty Levitte, 46% completions in the loss with a touchdown and 2 picks. On the year, Levitte, 47% completions, 5 touchdowns, 3 picks, 8.7 yards per attempt. But Temple, this is a team that's really struggling with points on offense, and Navy can score since coming off the bye week. In AAC play, the Owls are giving up 522 yards, 5.1 yards per rush. The play here will be Navy here at -13.5. Toledo and Eastern Michigan college football pick Saturday. Toledo fell to 5-3 after their 34-27 road defeat at Buffalo. Rockets put up 438 yards in defeat, 198 of it rushing on 38 carries. On defense, they allowed 4 yards per rush to the Bulls with 245 passing on 39 attempts. Daquan Finn on Mac low, 53% completion rate, a touchdown, 4 picks, season low, 5.1 yards per attempt. Now in Mac play, Finn 61% completions, 10 touchdowns, 4 picks, 7.6 yards per attempt. Now Eastern Michigan, they're 5-3, a 20-16 road win at Ball State. Eagles gained 348 yards in the win with 151 on the ground on 46 carries. Defensively, EMU held the Cardinals to just 202 yards, limiting both the run and pass. Eagles had a +3 turnover margin. Austin Smith, 59% completion rate in the win, 5.8 yards per attempt. And he's returning from being benched early in the season. On the year, Smith, 57% completion rate, 4 touchdowns, 6 picks, 6.7 yards per attempt. Back-to-back road games here for the Rockets. The past 3 games, Toledo is allowing 405 yards. The play will be Eastern Michigan +7. UAB and FAU college football pick. This one is on Saturday. UAB falls to 4-3 after their 20-17 road defeat at Western Kentucky. Blazers, a season low, 324 yards, 228 rushing on 39 carries. Defensively, they limited Western Kentucky's passing attack but allowed nearly 6 yards to carry on the ground. Quarterback DeAndre Hopkins exited the game last week with a concussion. Jacob Zeno in relief completed only 30%, 3.3 yards per attempt. In mop-up action last season, the Baylor transfer a 41% completion rate, 4.4 yards per attempt. FAU 3-5 after their 24-21 road defeat at UTEP. Owls gained 329 yards with 165 rushing on 38 carries. Defensively, they allowed UTEP to run for nearly 6 yards a carry, 179 passing yards on 26 attempts. N'Kosi Perry, 60% completion in defeat, 164 yards passing, 8.2 yards per attempt. On the year, Perry, 56% completions, 17 touchdowns, 5 picks, 7.2 yards per attempt. UAB quarterback situation is a concern. Blazers have defended well on the season. Play here will be UAB and FAU under 46.5. Wyoming versus Hawaii college football pick Saturday. Wyoming moved to 5-3 after their 28-14 home win to Utah State. Cowboys a season high 529 yards, 330 rushing on 50 carries. Defensively, they held the Aggies to 3 yards a carry with 104 passing on 26 attempts. Andrew Peasley completed 50%, 7.7 yards per attempt on the year. Peasley, 53% completion rate, 9 touchdowns, 3 picks, 6.1 yards per attempt. Hawaii, they're 2-6 after their 17-13 road defeat at Colorado State. The Rainbows gained 257 yards with 84 on the ground. On defense, they allowed 5 yards per rush with 177 yards passing on 24 attempts. Braden Shager, 60% completions in the loss, 5.8 yards per attempt. Shager on the year, 58% completion rate, 4 touchdowns, 6 picks, 6.1 yards per attempt. The Cowboys allowed 14 points per game in each of their past 2. Hawaii has given up nearly 6 yards a carry this season. Wyoming's running game sharp last week. Play here will be Wyoming at minus the 11.5. Rutgers and Minnesota college football pick. This one here is on Saturday. Rutgers improved to 4-3 after their 24-17 home win to Indiana. Scarlet Knights gained only 305 yards in the victory, 192 rushing on 50 carries. Rutgers eliminated the Hoosiers on the ground, surrendered 210 passing yards on 41 carries. They did recover from a 14-0 deficit. Noah Vidro, 50% completions in the win with only 4.7 yards per attempt. In his 2 starts this season, Vidro career low, 46% completion rate, 6.3 yards per attempt. Of course, Minnesota fell to 4-3, a 45-17 road defeat in the primetime hours at Penn State. Golden Gophers gained 340 yards with 165 on the ground on 46 rushes. Defensively, they allowed nearly 5 yards a carry on the ground, surrendered 340 yards passing on 33 attempts. Starting quarterback Tanner Morgan out with a concussion. The backup, Ethan Kalekamanis, completed 41% of his passes, 8 yards per attempt on the season. Kalekamanis, 42% completion rate, touchdown, 3 picks, 7.8 yards per attempt. 3 straight losses for the Golden Gophers was scoring a big issue. Golden Gophers, though, are holding teams to just 16 points a game. The play will be Rutgers and Minnesota under 41.